Hello and welcome. My name's Angie Holden and I'm the blogger behind the Country Chic Cottage. Cricut recently released a watercolor marker set with a water pen, so you can use the markers in your Cricut machine, draw whatever you would like, then use the water pen to create a watercolor effect on the paper. Along with that, they released some watercolor cards in various sizes. Now I'm going to make the cards, but I am also going to make a tag that's just on regular watercolor paper. So the markers themselves you don't have to use on the cards. You can use it on, I would recommend, watercolor paper so it holds up well, but you can use them on other paper and get that watercolor effect. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover the new products that were released, how they work, how to get your designs in Cricut Design Space, what designs can you use. I'm going to use a variety of them, and then using the water brush itself on those cards or paper after you draw in your Cricut machine. And yes, you can cut these as well. So I'm going to cut some of the watercolor cards as well as the watercolor paper that I'm going to draw on, so you can combine this with the cut functions of your Cricut as well. So let's take a look at these new products. So here are the new items from Cricut. So first of all, there's a watercolor marker and brush set, and it comes in regular for the Explore Maker series, as well as a Cricut Joy size. And then there are watercolor cards. So you will find a variety of sizes. I have the S40, the R20, and the R40 here to play around with. Now you can use these markers on just regular watercolor paper as well to make like art and things like that. I do have the watercolor cards to play around with, but if you have watercolor paper at home, pick up the watercolor marker and brush set and you can play with those just with watercolor paper. I would recommend watercolor paper just because it holds up better when you add the water. And it does come with a water brush inside. You will need to add water to that, and I'll show you how to do that. So now let's take a look at what these markers look like when applied to these cards. So here's just a sample piece that I made, and I actually used one of the cards. However, you could just use paper for this if you wanted to make your own. So what I did is just drew lines across and then used the water brush. So what you do is take the top off, and then this white cap unscrews, and then you just put regular water inside, put the cap back on, and when you squeeze this portion of the brush, water will come out on the bristles here. Might take a little practice to control like how much water comes out, and as you can see, so basically I went more water on this side, less on this side. So you can see that it's darker over here where there's less water, and the more water I used, the lighter and more pastel the colors got. Down here, I did some blending techniques. So if you had red and yellow next to each other in your design when you drew with your Cricut machine, you might get some colors that look like something like this, where those colors are close together. So I did want to know if I got the colors close to one another, what kind of would the result be as far as the two colors blending together with the water. So you can kind of see some of those experiments here, and again you can do your own experiments as well. And then down here, what I was doing is kind of wiping the brush off as I was going along, because if you're doing the red and then you go straight to the yellow, some of the red will still be on your brush, for example. So what I would recommend is keeping a paper towel, wiping that brush off on a paper towel in between colors so you don't get color mixing from the brush itself. So now let's take a look in Cricut Design Space at the watercolor designs and make a project. All right, so there are several ways that you could use these watercolor markers. So the first would be to go to projects, and you could literally search for just watercolor cards. This would pull up things that are already in Design Space that they've intended to be used with the watercolor markers. So you could pick one of these. So let's say that I wanted to do the Christmas tree, then I would pick the finished size that I want and click customize if I wanted to like pull it onto the mat and change it, or just click make it. So you could do that with any of the pre-made designs, or you could make your own design. So let's go to images. Let's click browse all images. And then if you go to project type, they've added 4 watercolor markers. So if we click that, we can see all the designs that were intended to be used with the watercolor markers. Now, you can use any drawn design with the watercolor markers, but these were intended to be used with the markers themselves. So you could pick one of these and add it to your canvas. So let's use this hot air balloon for an example and click Add to Canvas. You will see that these come in as pin lines, and you do have a cut line. So this could be used with regular paper, or we could delete that cut off. We would just have pin designs, and we could add it to the front of the card, however we wanted to do that. When we click these pin designs, pull down the pin, you can actually change these to marker and then scroll all the way down. And the watercolor marker colors are there. So if you are questioning whether you have that color and you're dealing with a regular pen design, you can scroll all the way down here and pick the watercolor marker colors. The lines will get bolder when you pick those, just to represent that the marker is thicker. However, you can leave these as regular pen colors if you would like, and just add in the appropriate watercolor marker when your machine asks for it. Then let's take a look at text. So generally we talk about text and we say, well, if I write it with a pen, I can't fill it in. However, now we have a way to kind of fill that in after we use it. So let's just type the word hello. So I picked this chip decor font, and if we change this to pen at this point, you'll see it becomes an outline. And when we do those outlines drawn with the watercolor pens, then we can kind of fill it in with the watercolor and create a really cool effect. You could do the same thing with shapes. So we could add shapes to a card or to watercolor paper, and it would just draw, of course, the outline, and then we could use the watercolor to fill in the inside. If we go to images again, we could search for anything, pull down operation type, and do draw only. So these were made to just be drawn with regular pens, but we could draw them with watercolor markers and use that watercolor effect on any drawn image in Cricut Design Space. So you can kind of let your imagination go here and pick designs that will work with either the cards or the art that you want to make. So I'm going to use what we've discussed here to pull up a few different designs, and we'll make some cards. So here are the designs we're going to be making. This one was just an image, and I changed it to a pen operation with the watercolor markers and sized it for the square card. Again, this was an image, changed each layer to a pen operation, attached those together, and made it the size of the largest card that I'm going to make. This one was actually an insert card. So part of this is going to be cut out. You see I still have a cut layer. We're going to leave that as a cut layer. We're going to put a piece behind it. So I'm going to cut this piece out of paper to add behind the front of the card. I went ahead and removed the 4 corners of the insert card because I'm just going to use glue to attach it to the back of the front of the watercolor card. And then all of the draw layers of the card I changed to watercolor pens. Everything's attached together and ready to go. This version I'm going to put on a square card. It was actually a coaster design. I changed all the layers to pin layers and actually deleted off some of the layers that I didn't want. But I think with this circle around, it'll make a really cool effect with the watercolor pens, or we'll find out if it does. Then this was a tag in Cricut Design Space. I changed the pin layer to the watercolor pens. I'm going to do it on regular watercolor paper, see what happens, see if the Cricut machine will cut it, draw it, and then we'll use that water marker to make the watercolor really stand out. So now all of my designs are ready to go. You would make sure that your machine is picked up here, and then you would click Make It. Because some of these layers are on a regular mat, some I'm going to use the card mat, I'm going to do multiple ways, and click Continue. And what we can do on each one is pick the mat we want. Now it's going to try to put all these cards on the largest card here because this is sized for the largest card, but I'm just going to make this card first. So I would hide these layers. Then when I want to make that card, I just go back, click Make It, and hide these other layers instead. So I'm just going to hide the layers I don't need. And this one actually would not be on the card mat. So I'm going to move that to this sheet and click Confirm. And now on this sheet, I want this cut out of a different material. So we'll just do hide selected on one of these, and then again go back and click Make It again. So I'm going to make the tag first, and then this one I'll go ahead and put on a card mat, and for it I am going to put it on the R20 card. Design Space was correct. You can always change your card type here, and you can also move it around on the mat here if you don't like where it is. I'm going to go ahead and cut and draw on all of my projects, and then we'll see how to use the watercolor markers and put these projects together. So this first card is going to use the Cricut card mat. So just a quick tutorial for anyone that has not used it before. You just want to open your card, slip the card into the card mat. Make sure it's all the way over and all the way up. And then press it down into the adhesive on the card mat. You also want to move your star wheels on your machine to where they run down the center of the card mat. And then we're going to want to load whatever pen it's calling for first. And mine is calling for the red. So I'm going to load that and close the clamp. I have my dial set to custom and my material set to watercolor cards. I'm going to go ahead and load the mat. Then I'll just press go to draw. So once it's done with the first color, it will stop. You remove that pen and then add whatever pen it's calling for next. And in this case, that's yellow. Close the clamp, press go to draw. Finally, it's going to ask for the orange pen because this one used 3 colors. I'm going to add it, press go to draw. Once the final color is done, you can just unload your mat. Now you can just remove this card from your mat, and we'll take a look at using the watercolor brush in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of my projects first. I'm going to make the tag next, which means I have regular watercolor paper, light grit mat. I've chosen heavy watercolor paper as my material. Then we'll just load the mat. I have the green watercolor marker and the fine point blade installed. And then we'll press C to draw and cut. And now that it's done drawing, it will cut the tag shape. So once it's done cutting, we can remove it. Then you'll just want to remove your tag from the mat. Now I will say that the setting, the heavy watercolor paper setting, was not quite thick enough to cut this. I have like a super heavy duty watercolor paper here, so I probably needed a thicker setting, but otherwise it worked really great. This version of the card is going to both draw and cut, but I'm using 2 different colors. So the blue is the first color, card mat set up the same way. Then we'll go ahead and press go. Once the blue is done, it is asking for the red, so I'm just going to change the pen. Once it's done drawing this time, it will go directly to cutting. And then we can remove this one in the same manner. Here's that one removed from the mat in the same manner, and if you can tell, there are cutouts on it for a piece of paper that we're going to put on the inside. So now I'm going to make the rest of my cards, and then we'll take a look at adding the watercolor effect. So now let's talk about how to use the water brush. So again, you remove the top, put water inside, and as you squeeze it, water will come out on the bristles, and you can actually see it drip if you were to watch it. Now you can practice over here on the side. Once you squeeze, it does start just kind of flowing through, so you don't have to continually squeeze as you're doing your project. Now I'm going to do 1 color card first, but if you're switching between colors, you might want to go over here on a napkin and just squeeze it a few times, get some water on those bristles so that you don't mix those colors. Now that the water's flowing, I can just sort of start taking the water over here and filling in these lines to get like a fill effect on this text. And if it is just too much water coming out, I just kind of dab it off over here to the side, then come back in. Then we'll just keep going over these lines, and as you go over the lines, the marker sort of just turns to watercolor. So you can go out beyond the text if you would like. So on these, we could just stay within the lines, or we could go slightly outside of them and create kind of a watercolor effect with these little pieces. So we might go outside of the lines here, at least slightly, to get kind of a cool effect on these. So you can play around with staying in the lines or going outside of them. So there's one watercolor card, and we'll just set that aside, allow it to dry. They do dry fairly quickly. Here's one where I did two different colors and I did sort of a background effect. So this was all this circle around the outside, and I just pulled it to the outer edge to get a background around that. So you can get creative with these. For this version, I thought it would be fun to see what would happen if we kind of blend these together. So because it was all these different colors, I thought it would be fun to sort of blend the colors together instead of staying in the lines. So I'm going to stay in the lines, but blend, in this case, the orange and the red together to make the O. So that'd be fun to blend colors as well when you get a design where the lines are closer together. Remember, the more you go over the lines, the more they'll sort of blend into the paper. So if I keep going over this one, that middle line fades more. So you can go over it as much or as little as you would like. Here's the version with the cutout. I went ahead and did the watercolor on it. And then I had cut the piece that would go on the inside. We're just gonna add some adhesive to the inside of here. You could use whatever glue you wanted to use. I'm just gonna use some glue dots. And then just add the backing piece into place. And then you have a cute card, and you might wanna let it dry before you get it on your table, but that's okay. And then you have a cute card, and the paper shows through those leaf cutouts. Here's that tag as well, so I went ahead and did the watercolor effect, and as you can see, it looks great. And this is on regular watercolor paper. These are not the Cricut watercolor cards. So as you can see, it does work on regular watercolor paper as well. So these markers do give a really artistic effect. If you love the look of watercolor, I really think that you could master these pens and get that out of your Cricut machine. I do think these are for those of us, me, that can't draw. You can allow your Cricut machine to draw for you and then paint with that water brush to get a really cool watercolor card in the case of some of these projects, or like art for your home. Like some of these I could frame, like I really like the way this one turned out. You could frame like a piece of watercolor paper instead of making it into a card. So any of these could be art as well for your home to give as gifts. So think about this outside of the box a little bit. What else could you put watercolor on? I think there are tons of applications for the markers themselves with that water brush, not just the cards that they released. Now I will say that the cards are very, very nice cards. They are, however, not exactly white. They're more of a cream color. So if you're looking for a really stark white card, these are more of a cream. The watercolor paper I used was whiter, but still a little bit of a cream color. So I'm not familiar with like all the watercolor paper brands on the market at all. Not a watercolor paper expert at all. However, if you wanted like a true white, you might have to shop around a little bit for the right watercolor paper. So just a warning for those of you that might not like the cream color cardstock of the watercolor cards themselves. So hopefully this video helped you and explained everything you need to know about the new watercolor product from Cricut. If it did, give us a thumbs up. If you have any further questions about this product or anything we've covered, feel free to drop down in the comment section, ask away. And if you haven't already, head on over to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button. We have videos just like this one every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss any of those. So thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.